The dress fit like a whisper. Not the kind of whisper that makes you nervous, but the kind that feels like it was made for you and only you. I stood in front of the mirror, watching the fabric catch the light. The way the lace moved when I turned my head. My hands rested on the curve of the satin belt, feeling the weight of the day settle onto my shoulders. It wasn't just a dress. It was the finish line of 3 years of work. Saving, planning, hoping. And it was the beginning of something else, something I thought was forever. Daniel had been waiting outside the dressing room for almost 20 minutes. I could hear his voice through the door. Low and easy, talking to someone on the phone. Probably his sister, Beth. She had been unusually quiet all morning, which, given Beth, meant something was brewing. I pushed the thought aside. There would be time to worry about Beth later. Right now, I had a groom waiting. When I stepped out, Daniel looked up, and for a second, the world narrowed down to just the two of us. His smile was wide, genuine, the way it always got right before he kissed me. He held out his hand. "You look." He stopped, shook his head like he couldn't find the words. "God, you look beautiful." I took his hand, letting him pull me close. "So do you," I said, because it was true. He looked sharp in his tux. The kind of clean-cut handsome that made strangers smile at him on the street. People liked Daniel. Hell, I liked Daniel. Or at least, I thought I did. We posed for a few pictures with the photographer, then headed downstairs where the limo waited. The plan was simple: church, photos, reception, dancing, and then a flight to Mexico for our honeymoon. I had already paid for everything. I had even surprised him with the house, the one we were going to live in after the wedding. The deed was in both our names, though I hadn't told him yet. I wanted it to be a gift, something solid to start our life together. The ride to the church was quiet except for the soft hum of the tires. Daniel's fingers tapped against his knee. Restless. I asked if he was nervous. He shrugged. A little, but mostly excited. I believed him. Or I wanted to. The church was packed. Our families filled the first few rows, beaming. My mom had tears in her eyes, and my dad kept clearing his throat like he was about to say something important but couldn't quite get it out. Daniel's parents sat straight-backed, formal, like they were attending a state function instead of their son's wedding. Beth was next to her mother, her expression unreadable. The music started, and I took a breath. This was it. The ceremony went smoothly. Daniel didn't stumble over his vows, and I managed not to cry too much during mine. When the minister pronounced us husband and wife, the room erupted in applause. We signed the papers, posed for more pictures, and then headed to the reception hall. The reception was held at the Grand Oaks Country Club, all white linen and crystal glasses. The tables were covered in pale pink roses, and the band was already playing a soft version of our first dance song. I felt lighter than I had in months. For the first time in a long time. Everything felt right. And then Beth stood up. She held a glass of champagne like it was a microphone. Her smile sharp. "Before we eat, I just want to say a few words about our newest family member." She paused, scanning the room. "Penny, welcome. We're so happy to have you." I smiled politely, raising my glass along with everyone else. "Now," she continued, "since you're marrying Daniel, there are a few things you should know. This is a family that values tradition. We take care of each other. And in return, we expect certain commitments." She set her glass down and clasped her hands. "You're going to be serving this family. That means putting us first, making sure Daniel is taken care of, and being available whenever we need you. It's not a request. It's the way things are done here." The room went silent. I felt the blood rush to my face. My stomach dropped. Daniel was staring at his plate. I stood up slowly. "Excuse me," Beth tilted her head. "Did you hear me? You're here to serve our family. That's your role now." I looked at Daniel. "Did you know about this?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's just tradition. Don't make it a big deal." That was all I needed to hear. I set my napkin on the table. "Well, I have a question for you. Beth, is this your idea? Or did Daniel put you up to it?" Her smile widened. It's ours. And it's for your own good. I turned to Daniel. And you're okay with this? You're fine with me being, what? Some kind of servant in my own marriage? He finally looked at me, his mouth opening. But no sound came out. I took a step back. My heart was pounding. But I kept my voice steady. Then I think we have a problem. I walked out of the reception hall. The night air hit me like a slap. I called Jeremy before I even reached the car. I need you to get to the courthouse. Now. What happened? I'm canceling the wedding. And I need you to help me stop the house transfer. There was a pause. Are you serious? Deadly. The wind carried the scent of fresh cut grass and exhaust from the parking lot. I stood beside my car, hands gripping the key fob so tightly my knuckles hurt. My breath was coming fast, but I forced myself to slow it down. Get control. I told myself. You knew this might happen. No. I didn't. Not like this. Not in front of 200 people. Not with Daniel silent beside me. Jeremy arrived 10 minutes later. His tie loosened and his jaw clenched. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Where's Daniel? Inside. Still sitting at the table like nothing happened. And you? I'm done. I unlocked the car and slid behind the wheel. We need to get to the courthouse before anyone thinks to check the paperwork on the house. Jeremy got in, starting the engine without another word. As we pulled out of the country club, I risked a glance in the rearview mirror. The building was lit up like a wedding cake. But I felt nothing except a cold, hollow certainty. I had made the right call. I hoped. The courthouse, the county clerk's office, was nearly empty at this hour. Jeremy handled the conversation with the clerk. His voice calm but firm. We need to halt a property transfer. Deed filed yesterday. Joint ownership. Client wants to rescind before it's recorded. The clerk gave us a skeptical look. You have proof of separate funds. I handed over the bank statements. The closing documents. The paper trail that showed I'd paid the entire purchase price from my personal account. All of this was mine. He never contributed a dime. Jeremy added. We'll also be filing for an emergency injunction to prevent any sale or refinance until the matter is settled. The clerk nodded, clearly aware this was bigger than a simple clerical error. I'll flag the file. It'll take a judge's signature to make it stick. But I can hold it for 24 hours. That's all we need. Jeremy said. We left the courthouse with the faint buzzing of adrenaline still in my veins. The reality was sinking in. I had cancelled my wedding less than 4 hours after walking down the aisle. I had burned every bridge to Daniel's family in front of everyone I knew. And yet, I felt strangely peaceful. Like I had cut a rope that had been strangling me for months. The calls began by the time we got back to my apartment. My phone was vibrating non-stop. 50 missed calls from Daniel. 37 from Beth. 12 from Martha, Daniel's mother. Messages stacked up like a pile of accusations. Daniel, Penelope, please talk to me. This isn't what it looks like. Beth, you've embarrassed us all. Fix this. Martha, tradition matters. You owe us respect. I muted the phone and handed it to Jeremy. Don't give it back until tomorrow. Inside my apartment felt smaller tonight. But safer. I sank onto the couch and rubbed my temples. Jeremy sat across from me. Arms crossed. You want to tell me why you ignored every warning sign? I laughed bitterly. Warning signs. Jeremy. I thought I was marrying a guy who respected me. Turns out he respects his sister more. You talked about Beth before the wedding. Said she seemed off. Off isn't the word. She was calculating. Manipulative. And Daniel, he always said she was just being protective. I thought that meant she cared. I was wrong. Jeremy leaned forward. What do you think would have happened if you hadn't called it off? I stared at the floor. I'd be trapped. The house was the first step. Then they'd have me quit my job. Take care of his parents. Host Sunday dinners. Be available whenever Beth needed something. All while he sat back and let it happen. Because that's what he's used to. Exactly. I took a deep breath. I saw it today. He didn't defend me. He didn't even argue with her. He just froze. And that's worse than if he'd agreed with her. At least then I'd know where I stood. The first crack I thought about the first time Daniel mentioned his family's expectations. It was 6 months ago. Over dinner. He'd said, "They're old-fashioned. But it's not a big deal. Just be polite and helpful. And they'll love you." I'd laughed it off. "I'm not here to be their maid, Daniel. You will be," he'd said, jokingly, but in a cute way. At the time, I thought it was a throwaway comment. Now I realized it was a test. A way to see if I'd accept the role they had planned for me. And I had failed the test. Which was why they were doing this now. In front of everyone. The aftermath the next morning. The story was everywhere. Local news sites picked it up. Bride cancels wedding after family's shocking reception speech. Social media exploded with opinions. Most of them siding with me. But enough vicious comments to make me log out of every account. Jeremy brought me coffee and a folder. "I've drafted a statement. Short. Factual. No emotion. We release it to the press. Then we let it die down." I read it, nodding. "Good. I'm not explaining anything to anyone. You don't owe them a narrative." I appreciated that. I really did. But the truth was, I felt exposed. Like I'd been stripped naked in front of the world. And the worst part was knowing I had let it happen. The confrontation 2 days later. Daniel showed up at my door. I hadn't given him my new address, which meant he'd found it through his family. I considered not answering. But I needed to see him. Needed to hear whatever excuse he was going to offer. He looked tired. His suit was wrinkled. His eyes bloodshot. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside. "Make it quick." We sat at the kitchen table. He wouldn't look at me. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have stopped her." "You didn't stop her because you agree with her." "No. I mean, I didn't know she was going to say that. She's always been difficult. But I thought you'd understand." "Understand what?" "That I'm supposed to be a servant in my own home. That my career doesn't matter. That your family comes first. Always." He ran a hand through his hair. "It's not like that. It's just, we're a unit. We take care of each other. I'm not your family, Daniel. I'm your wife. Or I was supposed to be. There's a difference." He finally met my eyes. "I love you, Penelope. I made a mistake." I stood up. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. And I made one too." The end of chapter 1. I watched him walk out the door. And for the first time in weeks, I felt free. Not happy, happy would come later. But free. The weight that had been pressing down on me since the engagement was gone. I locked the door behind him and leaned against it, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The vows we broke weren't just the ones we exchanged at the altar. They were the promises I made to myself, to compromise, to forgive, to believe in someone else's definition of love. Those vows died at the reception hall, along with the illusion that Daniel would ever choose me over his family. Tomorrow, I would start over. Clean slate. No wedding dress. No ring. Just me. My business. And the certainty that I deserved better. The silence in my apartment after Daniel left was heavier than I expected. It pressed against my ears like a physical thing. And for a moment I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. Not the cancellation, that still felt right, but the way I'd ended things with him. Cold. Final. No room for negotiation. Jeremy arrived at 9 the next morning with a bag of groceries and a determined look. "You're not eating cereal for breakfast again," he said, setting a box of eggs on the counter. "We need to get you back on schedule." I nodded, but my hands were trembling as I poured the orange juice. "I'm fine, Jeremy." "Really?" "Bullshit." He cracked eggs into a bowl without asking. "You're in shock. And that's normal. What happened to you isn't normal." I sat at the table, watching him move around the kitchen. In the background, the local news channel played on mute, the screen showing a grainy photo of me leaving the reception hall. The headline scrolled across the bottom, "Bride walks out after bizarre family ultimatum." Jeremy turned the volume up slightly. A reporter was saying, "Sources claim the bride was confronted with a list of demands from the groom's family, including a clause that she would be expected to leave her job and become a full-time caretaker for the extended family." I closed my eyes. I should sue them for defamation. Not yet. Jeremy plated the eggs and set them in front of me. Let them dig their own hole first. The list an hour later. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. The message contained a photo of a handwritten list, dated the day before the wedding. The handwriting was sharp, precise. Beth's rules for the new wife: resign from your job within 1 month of marriage. Be available to drive family members to appointments, school, and social events. Host weekly family dinners at our home. Prioritize Daniel's needs above all others, including your own. Do not question decisions made by Daniel or his mother. Any income you earn is to be disclosed to the family for budgeting purposes. You will be referred to as Penny in all family correspondence. Your social calendar is subject to approval by Daniel's mother. Failure to comply will result in a review of your status in the family. These rules are non-negotiable. I stared at the list until the words blurred. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a blueprint. A plan. They hadn't been making idle threats at the reception, they'd been reading from a script. Jeremy read it over my shoulder. Holy shit. He said quietly. This is insane. I whispered. It's not insane, Penelope. It's deliberate. They've been planning this for a while. I thought back to the months leading up to the wedding. The way Beth had insisted on being involved in every detail. From the seating chart to the menu. The way Daniel's mother had questioned my ability to manage a household. The way Daniel had brushed off my concerns, calling me paranoid and overreacting. I'd thought I was being difficult. I'd thought I was the problem. I was wrong. The press conference by noon. A producer from a national morning show had tracked me down. Jeremy handled the call. His voice cool and professional. Ms. Caldwell is not interested in an interview at this time. We can offer a private segment. The producer countered. No other outlets will have access. We'll present her side of the story with full respect. Jeremy glanced at me. I shook my head. Tell them no. Why not? He asked when the call ended. Because I don't want to give them the satisfaction. This isn't about me anymore. It's about them. And the more attention we give them, the more power they have. Jeremy sighed. You're being smart. But it's going to get worse before it gets better. He was right. By evening, the story had spread to gossip blogs and social media. A video clip from the reception, filmed on a phone, went viral. Beth standing at the microphone, delivering her welcome speech with a smile that chilled my blood. Comment sections were flooded with outrage, but also with speculation. Some people accused me of overreacting. Others praised me for seeing the red flags. None of it mattered. Nothing mattered except the fact that I had escaped. The call late that night. Daniel called. I let it ring once before rejecting it. 5 seconds later. He tried again. And again. And again. By the 10th attempt, I turned my phone off completely. The next morning, Jeremy handed me a printout of the voicemail transcripts. Message 1, Penelope. Please. Just listen to me. This isn't what it looks like. Message 2, I talked to Beth. She said she went too far. She didn't mean it. Message 3, Mom's furious. She wants me to fix this. Please. Talk to me. Message 4, I'm coming over. Don't hang up on me. Message 5, Penelope? Pick up. Please. I crumpled the paper in my fist. He's lying. About what? Everything. If Beth went too far, why was she holding a typed list? Why was Mom smiling while she said it? Why didn't Daniel stop her? Jeremy's expression hardened. Because he's complicit. Or scared. I suggested. Maybe he's just as trapped as I would have been. No. Jeremy's voice was firm. Daniel chose this. Every single time you voiced a concern, he dismissed it. Every time Beth acted out, he enabled her. He made his bed. Penelope, don't fall for the poor me routine. I wanted to believe Jeremy was right. I needed to believe it. Because if Daniel wasn't complicit, if he was just weak, then maybe there was still hope for us. Maybe I could have fixed things. Maybe I could have saved him. But the list proved otherwise. This wasn't weakness. This was strategy. The decision later that afternoon. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. My business was struggling. weddings booked before the scandal had been cancelled, and new inquiries had dried up. But I refused to let them destroy me. I updated my website with a brief statement, effective immediately. Penelope Caldwell Events will resume operations under new management. We appreciate your patience and support during this difficult time. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Jeremy offered to handle the legal side of things, drafting cease and desist letters for anyone attempting to use my name without permission. They want to drag you through the mud, he said. Don't give them the shovel. I smiled faintly. I won't. The visit 3 days after the wedding, Daniel showed up at my apartment again. This time, he didn't knock. He let himself in with a key I hadn't taken back yet. I was on the phone with a client when he walked in, so I gestured for him to wait while I finished the call. He didn't wait. He sat down at the table, his presence suffocating. I need to talk to you, he said, his voice low. I ended the call and turned to face him. I have nothing to say to you. You have to listen. He leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. Beth was wrong. I was wrong. I should have stopped her. I should have defended you. You didn't. I know. He looked down at his hands. I was afraid. Afraid of losing them. Afraid of being alone. But I see that now. I see that I was choosing the easy way out instead of standing up for what mattered. I wanted to feel sorry for him. I really did. But the list was still in my mind. Its words seared into my memory. It's too late. Daniel. I know. He stood up, his eyes glistening. I need you to know that I never wanted this. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The silence said everything. He left without another word. The aftermath the following week. The calls and messages slowed. The press moved on to the next scandal. My business started to pick up again. Slowly but surely. Jeremy remained by my side, handling the legal fallout and offering quiet support. One evening, as we sat on my balcony watching the sunset, he turned to me. You're doing okay. Am I? Yeah. He smiled. You're angry, but you're healing. And that's important. I nodded, leaning back in my chair. I keep thinking about the vows we broke. Which ones? The ones I made to myself. To be patient. To be understanding. To believe in him. I paused. I won't make those mistakes again. Jeremy reached over and squeezed my hand. Good. The rules broken a month later. I received a certified letter from Daniel's attorney. It demanded mediation over the house, citing breach of implied contract and emotional distress. Jeremy assured me it was a bluff. But I read the letter anyway. Its tone was arrogant, confident that they could bully me into submission. I forwarded it to Jeremy with a note. Burn this. He replied 5 minutes later, already done. The turning point 2 months after the wedding. I booked my first new client since the scandal. It was a small corporate retreat. Nothing glamorous. But it was a start. As I hung up the phone, I felt something shift inside me. The fear was gone. The doubt was gone. All that remained was determination. I walked into the kitchen, where Jeremy was making dinner. We need to celebrate, I said. With what? Takeout. Wine. Something ridiculous. He smiled. You got it. As we sat down to eat, I realized something important. I hadn't just cancelled a wedding. I had cancelled a life that wasn't mine. And for the first time in months, I felt truly alive. The certified letter from Daniel's attorney sat on my kitchen counter like a ticking bomb. I stared at the official seal for a long time, willing it to disappear. It didn't. Instead, it taunted me with phrases like breach of implied contract and equitable distribution of jointly acquired assets. Jeremy had already shredded it. But the damage was done. The threat hung in the air. Invisible but heavy. They're not going to let it go, I said to Jeremy the next morning, my voice brittle. He was reviewing the latest legal filings. His brow furrowed. They'll try. But we've covered every angle. The house is yours. Legally. Ethically. Financially. There's nothing they can do. Legally. I repeated. But what if they drag it out? What if they make it so expensive I can't afford to fight? Jeremy set the papers down and looked at me. Penelope. You have more resources than they do. You've been saving for years. They're leveraged to the hilt. This isn't a fair fight. It's a bullying tactic. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But the letter had planted a seed of doubt. And it was growing. The house was the one thing I had done entirely on my own. I'd found it 6 months before the wedding, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town. It wasn't flashy, just a modest 2-story with a wraparound porch and a yard big enough for a garden. But it was mine. I'd scrimped and saved, pouring every bonus and tax refund into the down payment. I'd even taken on extra clients, working weekends and late nights to cover the closing costs. When I'd told Daniel about it, he'd been thrilled. "It's perfect," he'd said, running his hand along the banister. "We can start our life here." I'd smiled, keeping the truth to myself. It wasn't ours yet. It was mine. I'd planned to surprise him with the deed on our wedding day, a symbol of our future. Instead, it had become a weapon. Now, as I stood on the porch, the weight of that decision settled on me. I'd been naive. I'd thought the house would bind us together, not give them leverage. But I wasn't naive anymore. The plan. Jeremy and I spent the next few days going over the numbers, line by line. The house was worth $385,000. I'd put down $85,000 of my own money, with a mortgage in my name only. The deed had been transferred to both of us the day before the wedding. But Jeremy assured me the timing was on my side. "The key is to prove the transfer was contingent on the marriage," he explained. "If the marriage never legally happened, the transfer is void. And if they argue we were common law married," Jeremy snorted, "you lived together for 3 months. That's not nearly enough. And you never presented yourselves as husband and wife in any official capacity. We've got this." I nodded, but my stomach churned. The thought of a court battle made my skin crawl. I'd seen enough of Daniel's family to know they'd use every trick in the book to win. The call on Thursday. Daniel called. I let it go to voicemail, but he left a message. "Penelope, we need to talk about the house. I'm not trying to fight you. I just want what's fair." Fair. The word made me laugh bitterly. I played the message for Jeremy, who rolled his eyes. "What's fair in their world?" he said. "Giving you a fraction of what you put in? Letting you keep the house while they take half your income?" I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The mediation. A week later, we were seated in a sterile conference room, facing Daniel, his mother, and their attorney. The air was thick with tension, and the table felt like a battlefield. Martha, Daniel's mother, wasted no time. "This is absurd," she said, her voice sharp. "The house was meant for our family. You have no right to keep it." I folded my hands in my lap. "The house is in my name. I paid for it. The transfer was based on a marriage that never happened." "The marriage was real," Daniel interjected. "We said our vows. We signed the license. It counts." Jeremy slid a copy of the marriage certificate across the table. "Actually, it doesn't. The officiant failed to file the license with the county. Without that, the marriage is invalid." Martha's face turned red. "You're lying." "I have the documentation to prove it," Jeremy said calmly. "You can check with the county clerk yourself." The room fell silent. I could feel Daniel's gaze on me, but I refused to look at him. The offer. After a long pause, their attorney cleared his throat. "We're prepared to offer you $50,000 in exchange for your share of the house." I stared at him. $50,000. I put down $85,000. "And that's not counting the improvements I've made." "It's a generous offer," the attorney said. "Consider the publicity." I almost laughed. "You think I'm going to cave because of a few tabloids?" "It's not just the tabloids," Daniel said quietly. "It's the stress. The fighting. Can't we just move on?" I finally looked at him. His eyes were pleading, but I saw the truth behind them. He wasn't trying to make peace. He was trying to protect his family's interests. "No," I said. "I'm not giving up my home for $50,000 and a pat on the head." The exit. The mediation ended without resolution. As we walked to the car, Jeremy put his arm around my shoulders. You did great in there. I wanted to strangle her. I admitted. I know. He smiled. But you kept your cool. That's what matters. I leaned into him, grateful for his support. The fight wasn't over. But I felt stronger than I had in weeks. That night, I packed a bag. Not because I was running, I was choosing. I was taking control. I called a real estate agent the next morning, listing the house for sale. You're selling? Jeremy asked. Surprised. I can't stay here. I said. Not after everything. I need a fresh start. He nodded. Understanding. Where will you go? Chicago. I said without hesitation. I have a friend there who's been asking me to visit. It's time. The move was quick. I sold most of my furniture, keeping only the essentials. The house sold in a week. And I used the proceeds to pay off the mortgage and secure a new apartment in Chicago. On my last night in the house, I sat on the porch, watching the sun set. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. I thought about everything that had happened, about the vows I'd broken and the ones I'd kept. I had kept the most important vow of all, to myself. The arrival Chicago was different. The air smelled like coffee and ambition. And the pace was faster, more impersonal. But I liked it. I liked the anonymity, the sense that I could be anyone I wanted to be. My new apartment was small. But it was mine. I decorated it with pieces I'd collected over the years, creating a space that felt like me. Jeremy visited a week later, helping me unpack and explore the city. You look happier, he said, watching me arrange books on a shelf. I am, I said honestly. I feel like I can breathe again. He smiled. That's the best part. The future. A month after the move, I landed a major event contract. A high-profile gala for a tech company. It was a risk. But I was ready. I threw myself into the work, pouring all my energy into making it perfect. The night of the gala, I stood on the balcony, watching the guests mingle below. The city lights twinkled like stars. And for a moment, I felt a sense of peace. I had lost a lot, but I had gained something priceless, freedom. And that was worth more than any house, any ring, any vow. Chicago wrapped itself around me like a wool blanket in January, heavy, damp, and oddly comforting. The wind off Lake Michigan carried a sharp bite. But the city moved with a purpose that felt reassuring. Here, no one knew my name. No one cared about the viral video of a bride walking out of her own wedding. For the first time in months, I felt invisible. And I realized I wanted it that way. My new apartment was on the third floor of a brick building in Logan Square. It had tall windows that let in too much light in the mornings. But I didn't mind. The floors creaked. And the radiator banged when the heat kicked on. But it was mine. I'd chosen it. Paid for it. Furnished it with the few things I'd kept from my old life, a worn leather couch, a stack of cookbooks, and the painting I'd bought with my first paycheck from the event planning business. Everything else had been left behind, the furniture, the china, the memories. Jeremy stayed for a week after the move, helping me settle in. He cooked meals, hung shelves, and listened while I talked through the details of the mediation, the house sale, the endless stream of calls and messages. You're doing great, he said more than once, but I could hear the concern beneath his words. He knew I was running on adrenaline, and he worried about what would happen when it ran out. It ran out on a Tuesday, 3 days after he left. The crash. I woke up to an empty apartment, the silence pressing against my ears like static. The sun was barely up, and the streets below were quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, and felt the weight of everything crash down on me. I thought about the dress, still hanging in a garment bag in my closet. I thought about the ring, locked in a safe deposit box. I thought about the vows I'd broken and the ones I'd kept. Mostly, I thought about Daniel. I hadn't heard from him since the mediation. No calls, no messages, no emails. His silence was louder than any argument we'd had. It made me wonder if he was finally done, if he'd accepted that the marriage wasn't happening, or if he was just regrouping, planning his next move. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through the contacts until I found his name. I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the call button. In the end, I didn't press it. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I called Jeremy. I need to talk, I said when he answered. What's wrong? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. He didn't ask questions. He just listened while I rambled, my voice cracking as I described the emptiness, the guilt, the fear that I'd made a mistake. I keep thinking about the way he looked at me during the mediation, I said. Like he was sorry. Like he wanted to fix things. He does want to fix things, Jeremy said gently. But not the way you need him to. I sighed. I know. You're grieving, Penelope. Grieving the life you thought you were going to have. That's normal. But I don't want to grieve, I said. I want to move on. You will, he promised. But it takes time. The press had moved on. But the internet never forgot. A few weeks after the wedding, a gossip blog dug up old photos of me and Daniel, captioning them with speculative headlines, from loved up to locked out, the bride who said no. A Twitter account dedicated to wedding fails reposted the video of Beth's speech, racking up millions of views. The comments were a mix of support and vitriol. But I didn't read them. Jeremy had set up alerts. And he filtered out the worst of it. But the knowledge that they were out there, dissecting my life, was enough to make my skin crawl. One morning, I got an email from a producer at a daytime talk show. The subject line read, "We want to hear your story." I almost deleted it. But something made me open it. The email was polite, professional, asking if I'd be interested in an on-camera interview to discuss standing up for yourself in the face of family pressure. I forwarded it to Jeremy, who wrote back within minutes, "Ignore it. They'll twist your words." I did as he suggested, but the email lingered in my inbox, a reminder that my life was no longer my own. The therapy. A month after the move, I found a therapist. Her name was Dr. Elise Carter, and she had a calm, measured way of speaking that put me at ease. Our first session was mostly me talking, trying to explain the whirlwind of the past year. "I feel like I'm constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop," I said. "Like they're going to show up at my door. Or the press will find me. Or Daniel will call and beg for another chance." Dr. Carter nodded. "That's a common reaction to trauma. Your body is stuck in fight or flight mode, even though the immediate danger has passed." "But what if it hasn't?" I asked. "What if they come after me again? Then we'll deal with it," she said simply. "But right now, you need to focus on grounding yourself in the present." She taught me breathing exercises, visualization techniques, ways to calm my racing thoughts. They helped, marginally, but the anxiety didn't disappear. It just retreated to the edges of my consciousness, waiting for an excuse to rush back in. The letter. 2 months after the mediation, I received a letter from Daniel. It arrived in a plain white envelope, addressed in his neat, familiar handwriting. I stared at it for a long time before opening it, my hands shaking. The letter was short, just a few paragraphs, typed on heavy cream-colored paper. He apologized for his behavior, for letting his family dictate the terms of our relationship. He admitted that he'd been afraid of losing them, afraid of being alone. "But I realize now," he wrote, "that I was losing myself. And I was losing you." He asked if we could meet, just once, to talk things through. "No lawyers. No mediators," he wrote. "Just you and me." I folded the letter and set it on the coffee table. I didn't know what to do with it. Part of me wanted to rip it up, to burn it, to erase the last trace of him from my life. Another part wanted to read it again, to memorize every word, to cling to the hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd changed. In the end, I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not yet. The business work kept me busy. The tech gala had been a success, and it led to several new contracts. I threw myself into the planning, using the distraction to avoid thinking about Daniel, about the wedding, about everything I'd left behind. My clients were happy. My employees were motivated. And for the first time in months, my bank account was healthy. One afternoon, I got a call from an old colleague, Rachel, who'd worked with me before I'd met Daniel. I heard about what happened, she said. I just wanted to say, I admire you. Seriously. Most people would have caved. Thanks, I said, genuinely touched. Listen, she continued. I've got a friend who's planning a destination wedding in Napa Valley. She's looking for a planner who can handle the details without micromanaging. I recommended you. That sounds amazing, I said, my heart lifting. Send me the info. When I hung up, I realized something important. I was good at my job. More than good. I was exceptional. And for the first time, I felt proud of what I'd built. Independent of Daniel or his family or anyone else. The dreams that night. I dreamed about the wedding. I was standing at the altar, wearing the dress. But Daniel wasn't there. Beth was at the front of the church, smiling that sharp, triumphant smile. She held up the list of rules, reading them aloud to the empty pews. I woke up sweating, my heart pounding. The dream recurred 3 more times that week. Each time, it was slightly different. Sometimes Daniel was there but silent. Sometimes he was arguing with Beth. Sometimes he was begging me to forgive him. But the ending was always the same. I was alone, walking away from the church, the dress tearing at the seams. Dr. Carter said dreams were a way for the subconscious to process unresolved emotions. You're still wrestling with the choices you made, she explained. That's normal. I nodded. But I didn't tell her that the dreams weren't just about the wedding. They were about the life I'd almost had. The life I'd walked away from. And the lingering fear that maybe, just maybe, I'd made a mistake. The call one Saturday morning. My phone rang. It was Daniel. I let it ring twice before answering. Hi, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Hi, he replied. His voice was softer than I remembered, tinged with something like relief. I wasn't sure you'd pick up. Why are you calling? There was a pause. I wanted to apologize. Properly. In person. We already did that, I said. At the mediation. That wasn't an apology. He said. That was a negotiation. I sighed. What do you want? Daniel, I want to see you. He said. I want to explain. I want you to understand that I wasn't myself. That I was scared. Scared of what? Of losing my family. He admitted. Of being alone. Of failing. But mostly, I was scared of admitting that I'd made a mistake. I closed my eyes. Daniel, we've been through this. It's over. I know. He said. But I need you to know that I regret it. That I regret letting them control me. That I regret hurting you. I wanted to believe him. God. I wanted to. But the list was still in my mind. Its words etched into my memory. It's too late. I said again. I know. He repeated. But I had to try. We sat in silence for a long moment. The connection fragile. Finally, I spoke. I have to go. Wait. I hung up. The aftermath the call left me shaken. I paced the apartment for an hour. My mind racing. I thought about the man I'd met 5 years ago. The one who'd made me laugh. Who'd supported me through the early days of my business. Who'd told me I was beautiful. That man still existed somewhere. Buried beneath layers of family loyalty and fear. But was he enough? Was he enough to overcome the list? The rules? The public humiliation? I didn't know. I didn't want to know. The decision a week after the call. I made a decision. I sent an email to Daniel. Short and to the point. I've thought about your request. I've decided not to meet with you. I wish you well. But I need to move on. This is goodbye. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't want one. That night, I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by the boxes I'd never unpacked. I opened the safe deposit box, took out the ring, and placed it on the coffee table. It sparkled in the light. A perfect circle of gold and diamond. I picked it up, held it to the light, and then set it down again. I was done. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of the first few weeks in Chicago. It was lighter, quieter, like the hush after a storm. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic, the soft tick of the clock. For the first time, I felt at peace. I didn't know what the future held, But I knew one thing: I was in control. I was free. And that was enough. The ring sat on the coffee table for 3 days. I stared at it each time I walked past, my reflection warping in the diamond's facets. It was a perfect symbol of everything I'd left behind: the promise, the lie, the life I'd almost accepted. On the 4th morning, I picked it up, slipped it into a velvet pouch, and placed it in the top drawer of my dresser. Not because I planned to keep it, I didn't, but because I couldn't bear to look at it anymore. Chicago had settled into a rhythm by then. The cold was brutal, but the city had a way of warming you from the inside out if you let it. My business was thriving. My apartment felt like home, and the nightmares had stopped. For the most part, I still flinched when the phone rang, still hesitated before opening emails from unknown addresses. But those moments were shorter now, less frequent. I was healing. I was learning to breathe again. Jeremy visited every few weeks, bringing with him a sense of stability that I craved. He'd sit at my kitchen table, sipping black coffee while I ranted about work or the latest drama with a vendor. He never offered unsolicited advice, he just listened. That was his gift. On one such visit, he arrived with a manila folder tucked under his arm. "What's that?" I asked, wiping flour from my hands. I'd been baking, a rare indulgence that helped ground me. "Something I think you should see," he said, placing the folder on the table. "But you need to promise me you won't freak out." I raised an eyebrow. "Define freak out." He smiled faintly. "Yell, cry, throw things. That depends on what's inside." He opened the folder and slid out a stack of documents. Bank statements, loan applications, credit card bills, all in Daniel's name. "I had a friend run a background check," he explained. "Just basic stuff. But what we found, it's interesting." I picked up the first statement. Daniel's checking account had a balance of $342.67. The savings account was empty. The credit cards were maxed out. "His broke," I said flatly. "More than broke," Jeremy corrected. "His leverage to the hilt. Mortgage on his condo. 2 car loans. Student debt. Plus tens of thousands in personal loans. And according to these dates, the spending spiked right after he got engaged to you." I flipped through the pages, my stomach tightening. He told me he was financially stable, that he had everything under control. Clearly, he lied. I thought back to the conversations we'd had about money. Daniel had always insisted on splitting expenses, but somehow, I'd ended up paying for most things: the engagement ring, the rehearsal dinner, even parts of the wedding. I'd assumed he was being chivalrous. Now I realized he'd been covering his debts. "Why would he lie about something like this?" I asked. "Because he needed you," Jeremy said simply. "Your income, your savings, your credit score. You were his ticket out of debt." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd thought I was marrying a partner. I'd thought we were building a life together. But Daniel had seen me as a lifeline, a resource, a means to an end. The debt over the next few days. I pored over the documents, tracing the patterns in Daniel's spending. There were payments to luxury stores, restaurants, travel agencies, but there were also transfers to Beth's account. Large sums that coincided with her business ventures, a boutique that never opened, a photography studio that folded after 6 months. He was funding her. I said to Jeremy one evening, "All those investments she bragged about, they were his money." "Looks that way," Jeremy agreed. "And if I had to guess, the rules at the wedding weren't just about control. They were about ensuring you'd keep the cash flowing." I laughed bitterly. He didn't even try to hide it. "He didn't have to," Jeremy said. "You trusted him. Why would you suspect anything?" I set the papers down and rubbed my temples. "I feel stupid." "Don't," Jeremy said firmly. "You were manipulated. That's not your fault." But the sting remained. I'd prided myself on being perceptive, on seeing through people's facades. Yet I'd missed the biggest red flag of all. The friend a week later, I met Rachel for lunch at a cafe near my office. She'd been a bridesmaid in my wedding, though she'd skipped the reception after Beth's speech. We caught up quickly. reminiscing about old projects before she lowered her voice. "I've been meaning to tell you," she said, glancing around the crowded cafe. "Something about Beth." I leaned in. "What is it?" "She used to date this guy, Mark. Back in college. Total control freak. He manipulated her into quitting her job and handing over her paycheck every week. When she finally left him, she swore she'd never let anyone treat her like that again. But she's doing the same thing to other women," I said, connecting the dots. Rachel nodded. "Exactly. And from what I've seen, she's been practicing on Daniel for years. He's always been weak-willed, but she twists him around her finger. It's like she gets off on it." I thought about the list again. The way Beth had smiled while reading it. She hadn't been nervous or defensive. She'd been triumphant. "She wanted me to fail," I said. "Not just fail," Rachel corrected. "She wanted you to break. To prove that she's the one in control." The pieces fell into place. Beth hadn't just been protecting her family's traditions. She'd been asserting dominance, establishing herself as the alpha female. And Daniel had been her pawn. The confrontation that night. I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned until I gave up. Grabbing my laptop and settling on the couch, I searched for articles about financial abuse in relationships, about coercive control tactics, about the psychology of enablers. The more I read, the angrier I became. Not just at Daniel and Beth, but at myself. I'd ignored the signs. I'd made excuses for their behavior. I'd convinced myself that love could conquer anything. But love hadn't conquered anything. It had blinded me. At dawn, I called Jeremy. "I need to talk to Daniel," I said. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "No," I admitted. "But I need answers." The meeting we met at a coffee shop on the outskirts of town. Daniel looked thinner than I remembered. His eyes shadowed with fatigue. He ordered a black coffee and sat across from me, his hands wrapped around the mug. "You wanted to talk," he said, his voice cautious. "I did," I agreed. "And I want the truth. All of it." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "What do you want to know?" "Start with the money," I said. "Tell me why you lied about your finances." His jaw tightened. "I wasn't lying." "Not exactly. I was in trouble. Okay? The business was struggling. The condo needed repairs. And Beth kept asking for loans. I didn't know how to tell you. So you let me pay for everything," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I didn't let you," he countered. "I asked you. And you said yes. Because I loved you." I shot back. "Because I thought we were partners." He looked down at his hands. "I know. And I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," I said. "You used me." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I did. And I hate myself for it." The confession hung between us, raw and ugly. For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. But it died quickly. Sympathy wouldn't undo the damage. "What about Beth?" I asked. "Why did she push so hard at the wedding?" Daniel hesitated. "She's always been competitive, especially with successful women. She saw you as a threat." "A threat?" I echoed. "Because I had a career, because you had everything she wanted," he said quietly. "Independence, confidence, a life that wasn't controlled by anyone." I thought about the list again. About the rules. About the way Beth had smiled while imposing them. She hadn't just wanted me to serve her family. She'd wanted me to fail. To prove that she was superior. She got what she wanted. I said bitterly. "I cancelled the wedding. I lost everything." "No," Daniel said firmly. "You gained everything. You just don't see it yet." I shook my head. "Don't." The truth, the conversation lasted another hour. But it yielded no surprises. Daniel admitted to enabling Beth's behavior, to prioritizing his family's approval over our relationship. He confessed that he'd known about the list beforehand, that he'd even suggested a few of the rules himself. "I thought it would make things easier," he said. "That you'd understand." "I understood all right," I replied. "I understood that you valued their opinion more than mine." He didn't deny it. When we parted ways, I felt emptier than before. The truth hadn't set me free, it had chained me tighter. I'd known Daniel was weak. But I hadn't realized he was complicit. That made it worse. So much worse. The fallout was swift. Jeremy advised me to document everything: the confession, the financial records, the timeline of events. If they come after you legally, we'll be ready, he said. But Daniel didn't fight. He disappeared again, his silence heavier than any argument. Beth sent me a single text message: "Enjoy your freedom. It won't last." I blocked her number without responding. The revelation: a week later, I received a package in the mail. It was addressed in unfamiliar handwriting, but the return label bore Daniel's name. Inside was a stack of photographs: Daniel and Beth, laughing together at a party; Daniel and Beth, arguing in a restaurant; Daniel and Beth, embracing like lovers. My hands shook as I flipped through them. The realization hit me like a freight train: they'd been sleeping together. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the photographs. Long enough for the sun to set, for the shadows to lengthen across the floor, long enough for the truth to settle in my bones. Daniel hadn't just enabled Beth's manipulation. He'd participated in it. He'd betrayed me with his own sister. The breaking point that night. I shattered. I threw the photographs across the room, screaming until my throat hurt. I punched the wall, over and over, until my knuckles split. I cried until I had no tears left, until the pain was a dull throb in my chest. Jeremy arrived at midnight, summoned by my incoherent voicemail. He found me curled up on the floor, surrounded by broken glass and torn photographs. He didn't speak. He just gathered me into his arms and held me until the shaking stopped. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry. Don't apologize," he said, his voice steady. "You didn't do anything wrong." But I did. I'd trusted him. I'd loved him. I'd believed in a lie. The aftermath: the photographs were gone by morning. I'd swept them into a trash bag and driven to the river, where I scattered them over the ice. As they sank, I felt a strange sense of closure. The evidence was destroyed. The lie was exposed. And I was finally free. Free from Daniel. Free from Beth. Free from the chains I'd wrapped around myself. The new beginning. I returned to Chicago a week later, my heart lighter than it had been in months. The apartment felt warmer, the air sweeter. I threw myself into work, taking on projects that challenged me, that reminded me of why I'd started my business in the first place. One evening, as I sat on the balcony watching the city lights, Jeremy joined me. "You're different," he said. "How?" "Stronger," he replied. "More resolved." I smiled. "I had to be." He nodded. And for a long moment, we sat in companionable silence. The wind carried the scent of roasted coffee from the cafe below, mingling with the distant hum of traffic. It was a perfect Chicago night. And for the first time, I felt at peace. The photographs were gone, scattered across the icy surface of the Chicago River like ashes from a funeral pyre. For a brief moment, watching them sink beneath the gray water, I felt a sense of catharsis, like I was burying not just evidence, but the last remnants of Daniel's betrayal. But grief doesn't evaporate that easily. It settles into your bones, turning ordinary moments into quiet acts of mourning. I woke up the morning after scattering the photos with a dull ache behind my sternum, the taste of copper on my tongue from biting it in my sleep. Jeremy noticed immediately when he arrived at my apartment that afternoon. "You look like hell," he said bluntly, dropping his briefcase by the door. He didn't wait for an invitation before pouring himself a glass of water from my tap and settling onto the couch. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were sharp, assessing. "Talk to me." I hesitated, then sank down beside him. "I'm fine." "Bullshit," Jeremy replied, uncharacteristically gentle. "You haven't slept in 3 days. You jumped when the microwave beeped earlier. That's not fine." I swallowed hard, staring at my hands. They were clean now, scrubbed raw from washing away the river water and the phantom stains of betrayal. "I saw them together," I whispered. "Daniel and Beth. In the photographs. They weren't just siblings. They were intimate." Jeremy's jaw tightened. He didn't speak for a long moment, letting me absorb the weight of my own words. Then he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. "I've been working on something," he said, sliding it across the coffee table toward me. "Legal groundwork. Protective measures." I opened the folder with shaking fingers. Inside were copies of court documents, affidavits, and a draft petition for injunctive relief. My eyes skimmed the bold headings: motion to restrain contact, petition for declaratory judgment, request for emergency injunction regarding property transfer. The language was dense, legalistic, but the intent was clear. Jeremy was preparing for war. "Who's the enemy?" I asked quietly. "Everyone who thinks they own you," Jeremy replied. He tapped the top document with his pen. "Starting with Daniel." The legal strategy. Over the next week, Jeremy and I immersed ourselves in the intricacies of Illinois marital property law. The house had been the primary flashpoint since the wedding debacle. But Daniel's attorney had shifted tactics. Instead of demanding half the equity outright, they were now arguing that the deed transfer constituted a valid contractual agreement, regardless of whether the marriage was legally recognized. Their position was backed by a clause buried in the paperwork I'd signed, a clause I vaguely remembered Daniel insisting I initial, claiming it was standard boilerplate. "Standard boilerplate," Jeremy repeated dryly when I showed it to him. He circled the offending paragraph with a red pen. "This gives them grounds to claim equitable interest based on promissory estoppel. Essentially, they are arguing that you induced reliance on the promise of marriage, and therefore owe Daniel compensation." "That's insane," I said. "I paid for the damn house." "Which strengthens your position," Jeremy acknowledged. He flipped to another page in the folder, pointing at a highlighted section. "But we need to prove that the transfer was contingent on consummation of the marriage, which means proving the marriage wasn't valid." I nodded, recalling the officiant's frantic phone call the day after the wedding. He'd forgotten to file the license with the county clerk's office, rendering the union technically unofficial. At the time, I'd viewed it as a bureaucratic hiccup. Now it was our legal cornerstone. "What about Beth?" I asked suddenly. Jeremy paused. "What about her? She's been orchestrating this," I said, my voice rising. "She manipulated Daniel, coerced him into agreeing to those ridiculous rules. Shouldn't she be liable too? Civil liability for emotional distress is notoriously difficult to prove," Jeremy warned, "especially without direct evidence of coercion. Unless you have recordings, witnesses, something tangible." "I have the list," I interrupted. "The handwritten rules Beth read at the reception. And Daniel's confession, he admitted he knew about it beforehand." Jeremy's eyes lit up. "That's a start. We can use his admission to establish a pattern of coercive control. It won't be enough to name her personally, but it supports the broader narrative of undue influence." The broader narrative was becoming our mantra. Jeremy was building a case not just to protect the house, but to dismantle the entire framework of lies Daniel and Beth had constructed. It was ambitious, risky, and terrifyingly expensive. "How much is this going to cost?" I asked, dreading the answer. Jeremy named a figure that made my stomach lurch. "I'll waive my standard rate," he added quickly. "And I've already spoken to a colleague who's willing to help pro bono. But court fees, filing costs, expert witnesses, it adds up." I thought of the money in my savings account, earmarked for a European vacation I'd planned with Daniel. Skiing in Switzerland, wine tasting in Tuscany. A lifetime of shared experiences that now felt like a cruel joke. I made the decision without hesitation. "Use it," I said. "All of it." Jeremy didn't argue. He simply nodded and began making calls. The deposition 2 weeks later, I found myself in a windowless conference room at Jeremy's law firm, facing Daniel's attorney across a long table. The man was in his late 50s, with a polished demeanor and eyes that never blinked. He introduced himself as Mr. Caldwell, a coincidence that did not escape my notice, and launched into a series of rapid-fire questions. "Ms. Caldwell," he began, his tone deceptively cordial. "You purchased the subject property in your name alone, correct?" "Yes," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "And yet, you voluntarily added Mr. Caldwell to the deed shortly before the wedding. Is that also correct? I did. I confirmed. Without any written agreement stipulating the terms of this transfer, I hesitated. The memory of Daniel's eager expression as I signed the papers was a fresh wound. It was a gesture of goodwill. I said carefully. A symbol of our commitment. Mr. Caldwell smiled thinly. A gesture that cost you $85,000. Would you say that was a wise financial decision? Given the brevity of your engagement, I would say it was a personal decision. I countered. Not a financial one. The questioning continued for hours, veering from the property dispute to the aborted wedding, the list of rules, and finally, the nature of my relationship with Daniel. Mr. Caldwell was relentless, peeling back layers of my testimony with surgical precision. You were aware of Mr. Caldwell's financial difficulties prior to the wedding, weren't you? He asked at one point. I stiffened. I was aware that he had some debt. Yes. But you chose to overlook it. He pressed. In favor of a more comfortable lifestyle. Perhaps, I chose to support him. I said. My temper flaring. Which is more than I can say for you. Apparently. Mr. Caldwell's smile widened. Emotions are running high. Ms. Caldwell. Perhaps we should take a break. I refused to be baited. I sat through the remainder of the deposition with my hands clenched in my lap. My answers clipped and precise. When it was over, Jeremy was waiting in the hallway, his expression unreadable. You did well, he said, though his eyes betrayed his concern. But he's setting traps. We need to be ready for cross-examination. I nodded, too exhausted to respond. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following month. In the meantime, the press renewed its interest in the case, dubbing it the Wedding War of Wool County. A local news station obtained a copy of the property transfer documents and aired a segment speculating about the bizarre prenuptial agreement that had allegedly sparked the legal battle. The anchor's tone was gleeful, her smirk visible even through the grainy footage. I stopped watching the news after that. Jeremy handled the media inquiries, releasing a brief statement that emphasized my commitment to resolving the matter swiftly and fairly. The subtext was clear. I was the victim, and I was fighting back. The support from strangers was unexpected. Women from across the country sent me letters and emails, sharing their own stories of manipulation and abuse. You're brave, they wrote. Thank you for speaking out. Their words were a balm, a reminder that I wasn't alone. But the backlash was equally fierce. An anonymous blog post accused me of weaponizing feminism to punish an innocent man. A popular podcast host called the case a cautionary tale about modern marriage. Even my own family was divided. My aunt, a staunch traditionalist, sent me a card that read, "Some things are better left unsaid." I kept the card. It served as a grim reminder of the forces arrayed against me. The day in court, the day of the hearing, arrived with a bone-deep chill. I dressed in a simple black suit, the same one I'd worn to the courthouse for the initial mediation. It felt appropriate. Somber. Jeremy met me outside the courtroom, his expression uncharacteristically tense. The judge is a stickler for procedure, he warned. We need to be airtight. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. The courtroom was packed. A sea of faces turned toward the front. I recognized a few reporters, their cameras trained on the witness stand. Daniel sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by his attorney and his mother. He looked older than I remembered, his face drawn and pale. Beth was nowhere to be seen. The judge entered the room, a stern woman with silver hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. She called the case and invited Mr. Caldwell to present his argument. The attorney rose, his voice smooth and confident. Your Honor, this case is about a broken promise. My client, Mr. Caldwell, entered into a verbal agreement with Ms. Caldwell wherein he would provide for her material needs in exchange for her companionship and domestic services. The property transfer was a manifestation of that agreement. When Ms. Caldwell unilaterally terminated the arrangement, she breached her fiduciary duty and must be held accountable. I felt the blood drain from my face. Companionship and domestic services. The phrase was clinical, dehumanizing. It reduced our relationship to a transaction. A quid pro quo. Jeremy rose to object. Your Honor, the plaintiff's characterization is inflammatory and inaccurate. There was no such agreement, verbal or otherwise. The property was gifted in anticipation of a lawful marriage, which, due to the plaintiff's failure to file the necessary documentation, never occurred. The judge nodded, her expression unreadable. Objection sustained. Counsel, please refrain from speculative assertions. Mr. Caldwell pressed on, shifting gears. Your Honor, we have evidence that Ms. Caldwell was aware of Mr. Caldwell's financial situation and exploited it to her advantage. She used her position as a trusted partner to gain control of his assets, then abandoned him when the going got tough. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. Jeremy's hand found mine, his touch steadying. Your Honor, he said, his voice low and firm. We have the depositions of multiple witnesses, including the officiant, who will confirm that the marriage was never legally recognized. Furthermore, we have bank records demonstrating that Ms. Caldwell funded the entire purchase of the property in question, with no contribution from the plaintiff. The judge leaned back in her chair, her gaze fixed on me. Ms. Caldwell, do you have any statement to make? I stood, my legs trembling. The room fell silent, the weight of 100 eyes pressing down on me. I took a deep breath, forcing the words out. I loved him, I said, my voice trembling. I thought we were building a life together. But the truth is, he was building a prison. And I refused to be a prisoner. The judge nodded, her expression softening slightly. Thank you, Ms. Caldwell. The court will reconvene next week to issue a ruling. The week that followed was a blur of anxiety and anticipation. I spent my days holed up in my apartment, fielding calls from Jeremy and rereading the case law he'd sent me. The legal jargon was dense, but the underlying principle was simple. The house was mine. The ruling came on a Friday morning, delivered via email. I stared at the subject line for a long moment before opening the attachment. In the matter of the petition for declaratory judgment and injunctive relief, I scanned the document, my heart pounding. The judge had ruled in my favor, declaring the property transfer null and void due to the lack of a valid marriage license. She also granted the emergency injunction, preventing Daniel from selling or refinancing the house without my consent. I collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down my face. Jeremy arrived minutes later, bearing champagne and a bag of takeout. We did it, he said, clinking his glass against mine. You did it. I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. The victory was sweet, but it came at a price. The legal fees had drained my savings, leaving me with just enough to cover the mortgage and basic expenses. My business was thriving, but the sudden loss of capital was a blow. I doubled my efforts, taking on extra projects and working long hours to rebuild my reserves. The emotional toll was harder to quantify. I'd won the battle, but the war had left scars. I flinched at raised voices, avoided romantic comedies, and started sleeping with a knife under my pillow. Jeremy tried to reassure me, reminding me that healing was a process. You're not the same person you were a year ago, he said one evening, his voice gentle. And that's okay. I nodded, but the truth was, I didn't know who I was anymore. The woman who'd walked down the aisle in that white dress was a stranger to me now. A cautionary tale of misplaced trust and blind faith. The aftermath: Daniel disappeared after the ruling. No more calls. No more letters. No more attempts at reconciliation. His silence was a relief. But it also left a void. I found myself wondering, not for the first time, if I'd been too harsh, if I'd given up on him too easily. But then I remembered the list. The photographs. The way he'd looked at me during the deposition. His eyes empty and cold. I remembered the weight of his family's expectations. The suffocating rules. The constant erosion of my autonomy. I had made the right choice. The new normal life in Chicago settled into a new rhythm. I hired an assistant to help with the workload. And for the first time, I felt like a real business owner. I took up kickboxing, channeling my anger into something productive. I reconnected with old friends, rediscovering the joy of platonic companionship. One evening, as I sat on the balcony watching the city lights, Jeremy joined me. "You're happy," he said, stating the obvious. I smiled, leaning into the warmth of his presence. "I am. Good," he said, raising his glass, "because the best part is yet to come." I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't have to. Somewhere, in the distance, a new chapter was waiting. And for the first time, I was ready to turn the page. The wind off Lake Michigan carried a sharp, metallic tang that morning, the kind that clung to your teeth and made your eyes water. I stood on the balcony of my apartment, wrapped in a thick fleece robe, watching the city wake up. The sky was the color of gunmetal, and the first flakes of snow were beginning to fall, spinning lazily in the wind. It was December, officially, and the city had that particular brand of bleak beauty that only Chicago could pull off. I loved it. I hated it. Mostly, I was indifferent to it now. The ruling had been in my favor for 3 weeks. The house was mine, legally and indisputably. Daniel had vanished, his absence more absolute than any argument or confrontation could have been. The press had moved on to newer scandals, and the steady hum of my business had returned. On paper, I was winning, but the victory felt hollow. Like a trophy made of lead, it weighed me down instead of lifting me up. Jeremy called it the reckoning. He said every survivor of trauma faced it eventually, the moment when the adrenaline faded and you were left alone with the wreckage. "You're there," he told me one evening, his voice gentle but firm. "It's okay to fall apart." I wanted to tell him I was fine. I wanted to say the right things, the strong things, the things that would make him proud. But the truth was, I was unraveling. I just didn't know how to admit it. The dream, it started with the dreams. Not the chaotic, violent ones from the early days, but something subtler, more insidious. I'd be standing in the middle of a crowded room, everyone smiling and laughing, and I'd realize I was wearing the wedding dress. Only it wasn't white anymore, it was stained with dirt and blood, torn at the hem, the bodice sagging like a deflated balloon. I'd search the crowd for Daniel, but he'd be gone, replaced by Beth, who'd be holding the list of rules and reading them aloud with that same sharp, triumphant smile. The worst part was waking up. Not the transition from sleep to consciousness, but the moment when I remembered that it had been a dream. That Daniel was really gone. That the wedding had really happened. That I had really cancelled it. That was the moment that broke me. Every single time, I stopped sleeping. At first, I told myself it was strategic, more hours in the day to devote to work, to rebuilding, to proving that I was stronger than they were. But the truth was simpler and more pathetic. I was afraid. Afraid of what my subconscious would show me if I let it roam free. The lack of sleep began to take its toll. I made mistakes at work, missed deadlines, forgot meetings. My employees noticed, their concern masked by professionalism. My clients noticed, their disappointment masked by politeness. I noticed, and the knowledge that I was failing at the one thing I'd always excelled at made the nausea in my stomach worse. The email, it came on a Tuesday, buried in the usual flood of spam and newsletters. The subject line was innocuous, catching up. The sender was listed as D.C. I almost deleted it without opening it. But something made me hesitate. My finger hovered over the delete key for a long moment before I clicked open the message. The email was short, written in Daniel's familiar style, careful, measured, designed to appear casual while conveying maximum information. "Penelope, I've been thinking about our conversation at the coffee shop. About what you said. About what I admitted. I can't stop thinking about it. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know that I'm not the same person I was. I'm in therapy. I've cut ties with Beth. I'm working to rebuild my life. None of that matters if you're not part of it. I miss you. I miss us. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking for one anyway. Meet me. Just once. No lawyers. No mediators. No scripts. Just you and me. Talking like we used to. If you're willing, meet me at the Bean in Millennium Park at 2 p.m. on Saturday. If you're not, I'll understand. I'll leave you alone forever. I read the email 3 times before closing it. My hands were shaking. And I felt the old familiar panic rising in my chest. Meet him. Don't meet him. Meet him. Don't meet him. The internal debate was instantaneous and exhausting. I forwarded the email to Jeremy without comment. He called me within minutes. Don't do it, he said without preamble. I know. I replied, staring out the window at the snow-covered street below. But I want to. You want closure. Jeremy corrected. You think this will give you answers. It won't. It'll just give him another opportunity to manipulate you. I'm not a child. Jeremy. I snapped. The frustration bubbling to the surface. I can handle a conversation. Can you? He asked quietly. Really? The question hung in the air between us. Heavy and uncomfortable. I didn't have a good answer. The preparation by Friday. I had made up my mind. I would meet Daniel. Not because I thought it would change anything. Not because I believed he'd changed. But because I needed to see him. I needed to look him in the eye and hear the words coming out of his mouth. Not read them in an email or hear them secondhand from Jeremy. I needed to know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that I was making the right decision. I told Jeremy about my decision over dinner, expecting him to argue, to lecture, to try to talk me out of it. Instead, he listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he pushed his half-eaten pasta around his plate and said, I'm coming with you. No. I said immediately. I need to do this alone. Then I'm waiting nearby, he countered. In the park. At a distance. If you need me, I'm there. I wanted to protest. To tell him he was being ridiculous. To insist that I could handle a simple conversation. But the truth was, I was glad he was coming. I was terrified. And having a safety net, however distant, made the idea of facing Daniel slightly more bearable. We spent the rest of the meal discussing logistics, the meeting time, the location, the escape routes. It felt absurd. Like we were planning a military operation instead of a conversation. But that was the world I lived in now. A world where every interaction had to be calculated. Every possibility anticipated. Every risk assessed. The meeting Millennium Park was packed despite the cold. The ice rink was filled with skaters, their breath visible in the frigid air. And the pavilion was lined with tourists taking selfies in front of the giant Christmas tree. I spotted Jeremy immediately, sitting on a bench near the north entrance. His coat collar turned up against the wind. He gave me a small wave. His expression encouraging. I took a deep breath and walked toward the Cloud Gate sculpture, better known as the Bean. Daniel was already there, standing in front of the reflective surface, his hands in his pockets. He looked the same height, the same build, the same dark hair that was starting to show hints of grey at the temples. But there was something different about him. Something in the set of his shoulders, the way he held himself. He looked smaller, somehow, less certain. Penelope, he said when he saw me, his voice barely audible over the noise of the crowd. Daniel, I replied, stopping a few feet away. I couldn't bring myself to say anything more. We stood in silence for a long moment, the wind carrying the sound of laughter and music from the skating rink. I could see our reflections in the curved surface of the sculpture, distorted and surreal. We looked like strangers. Two people who happened to be standing in the same place at the same time. Thank you for coming, Daniel said finally, breaking the silence. Don't thank me, I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. I'm only here because I need to understand. Understand what? He asked, turning to face me fully. Why? I said simply. Why you did it. Why you let her do it. Why you let me believe in something that wasn't real. Daniel took a step closer, his expression earnest. I was weak, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I know that's not an excuse. But it's the truth. I've always been susceptible to pressure. From my parents. From Beth. From anyone who was loud and certain. I thought I could handle it. That I could make everyone happy. I thought I could be the good son. The supportive brother. The devoted fiancé. I was wrong. Wrong doesn't even begin to cover it. I said, my anger flaring. You didn't just make a mistake, Daniel. You made a choice. You chose them over me. You chose their approval over our relationship. You chose to let them control you. To use me. To destroy everything we had. I know, he said. His eyes glistening. I know. And I hate myself for it. I've been hating myself for it every single day since you left. Do you? I asked. My voice cold. Or do you just miss having someone to take care of you? Someone to pay your bills? To soothe your ego? To make you feel like a man? The question struck home. I could see it in his face. The way his jaw clenched. The way his eyes darkened. He looked away. His breath fogging in the air between us. I miss you, he said finally. His voice thick with emotion. I miss the way you made me feel when I was with you. Smart. Capable. Worthy. I miss the way you looked at me. Like I was someone worth loving. I miss the way you laughed. The way you argued. The way you. He trailed off. Unable to continue. I wanted to feel something. Pity. Anger. Relief. Anything. But I felt nothing. I was an empty vessel. A shell of the woman I'd been a year ago. I was a survivor. A victor. A cautionary tale. But I wasn't a person anymore. Do you love me? I asked. The question falling from my lips before I could stop it. Daniel's head snapped up. His eyes wide with surprise. What? Do you love me? I repeated. My voice steady. Not the version of me that paid your bills and cleaned up your messes. Not the version of me that made you look good in front of your family. Do you love me? The real me. The one who has opinions and boundaries and a life that doesn't revolve around you. He stared at me for a long moment. His expression unreadable. I could see the wheels turning in his head. The calculation. The assessment. The desperate search for the right answer. I don't know, he said finally. His voice barely audible. The honesty of the admission was staggering. I had expected him to lie. To make promises. To say whatever he thought I wanted to hear. But he hadn't. He had told me the truth. Painful and ugly and real. I felt something then. A tiny crack in the armor of indifference. It wasn't love. And it wasn't forgiveness. But it was something. It was the realization that he was as broken as I was. That he was just as lost. Just as desperate for something to hold onto. But that didn't change anything. Then I guess we're done here. I said. Turning away. Penelope. Wait, I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I had come for answers. And I had gotten them. I had come for closure. And I had found it. In the most painful way possible. I had come to see if I was making the right decision. And the answer was yes. Yes. I was. Yes. I had been. Yes. I would always be. I walked away from him. From the bean. From the past that had defined me for so long. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The aftermath I found Jeremy where I'd left him. Sitting on the same bench. His coat pulled tight around him. He stood as soon as he saw me. His expression concerned. How did it go? He asked. Falling into step beside me as I headed toward the exit. Fine. I replied. My voice flat. I got what I needed. Did you? He hesitated. Searching for the right words. Did you tell him you still love him? I stopped walking. Turning to face him. No. I said. The word heavy with finality. I didn't. Jeremy nodded. Relief washing over his features. Good. We walked the rest of the way in silence. The wind at our backs. The city spread out before us like a map of possibilities. I felt lighter than I had in months. Not because the weight was gone. But because I had learned to carry it differently. I was still broken. Still healing. Still figuring out who I was in the aftermath of everything. But I was moving forward. I was choosing my own path. I was free. The apartment was quiet when we got back. The only sound the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant rumble of traffic. I dropped my keys on the counter and sank onto the couch. Exhaustion washing over me in waves. Jeremy sat beside me. His presence a comfort. Are you okay? He asked. His voice gentle. I will be. I replied. Closing my eyes. I am. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. I could feel his support. His understanding. His unwavering belief in me. It was enough. I thought about the man I'd been, the woman I'd become, the person I was still becoming. I thought about the vows I'd broken, the ones I'd kept, the ones I was still making to myself. I thought about the future, uncertain and bright, and the past, fading but not forgotten. I was not the same person I had been a year ago. I was not the same person I had been a month ago. I was not even the same person I had been that morning. I was changing, growing, healing. I was becoming. And for the first time, I was okay with that. The realization the next morning. I woke up before the sun. I lay in bed for a long time, listening to the silence, feeling the weight of the previous day settle into my bones. I thought about Daniel, about the meeting, about the look in his eyes when I had asked if he loved me. I thought about the way he had said, "I don't know," and the way it had made me feel, not angry, not sad, but something else. Something like relief. I had been waiting for him to say the right thing, to make the right choice, to be the man I had thought he was. I had been waiting for him to save me, to fix me, to make everything okay. But he couldn't. No one could. I had to save myself. I had to fix myself. I had to make everything okay. The realization was both terrifying and liberating. I was responsible for my own happiness, my own healing, my own future. I was the author of my own story, the architect of my own life. I was in control. I got out of bed, showered, dressed, and went to work. I threw myself into the projects, the meetings, the endless tasks that made up my day. I was efficient, focused, unstoppable. I was a machine. But in the quiet moments, when the work was done and the world was still, I allowed myself to feel. I allowed myself to grieve, to mourn, to remember. I allowed myself to be human. I was not the same person I had been a year ago. I was not the same person I had been a month ago. I was not even the same person I had been that morning. I was changing, growing, healing. I was becoming. And for the first time, I was okay with that. The vow I found myself at the jewelry store on Michigan Avenue, staring at the display case. The saleswoman approached. Her smile professional. "Can I help you find something?" "Not really," I replied, my eyes still fixed on the rings. "I'm just looking." She nodded, understanding. "Take your time." I did. I tried on rings, imagining the weight of them on my finger. The way they would look with the simple gold band I'd kept from my grandmother. I thought about the promise I had made to myself. The vow to never again let anyone else define my worth, my value, my future. I didn't buy a ring. I didn't need one. I had made my vow, and I intended to keep it. I left the store with a sense of purpose, a sense of direction. I was not the same person I had been a year ago. I was not the same person I had been a month ago. I was not even the same person I had been that morning. I was changing, growing, healing. I was becoming. And for the first time, I was okay with that. The end of the beginning. The snow continued to fall as I walked back to my apartment. The city transformed into a winter wonderland. I felt a sense of peace, a sense of completion. I had faced my past, confronted my demons, and emerged stronger. I had made my choice. And I had never been more certain of anything in my life. I was not the same person I had been a year ago. I was not the same person I had been a month ago. I was not even the same person I had been that morning. I was changing, growing, healing. I was becoming. And for the first time, I was okay with that. I unlocked the door to my apartment, stepped inside, and closed the door behind me. I was home. The snow had stopped falling by the time I reached my apartment, but the city was still wrapped in a thick, muffling blanket of white. The sidewalks were treacherous, and the wind carried a sharp, metallic tang that made my teeth ache. I moved carefully, my boots crunching through the slush, my breath fogging in the air. The sky was the color of pewter, and the buildings loomed like tombstones in the early morning light. It was January, officially, and Chicago had settled into its annual hibernation. I loved it. I hated it. Mostly. I was indifferent to it now. The meeting with Daniel had been a week ago. The conversation replayed in my mind like a tape loop. Each detail etched into my memory with painful clarity. His face. His voice. The way he had said, "I don't know," when I asked if he loved me. The admission had been honest. Raw. Devastating. It had also been the final nail in the coffin of whatever we had been. Whatever we might have been. I had thought I would feel relief. Closure. Vindication. Instead, I felt empty. Not the numb, hollow emptiness of the early days, but something deeper, more profound. It was the emptiness of a chapter closing, of a story ending, of a life being left behind. I was not the same person I had been a year ago. I was not the same person I had been a month ago. I was not even the same person I had been a week ago. I was changing, growing, healing. I was becoming. And for the first time, I was okay with that. The morning after I woke up on Saturday morning to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand, I groaned, reaching for it with one eye open, expecting it to be Jeremy with some urgent update about work. Instead, it was a text from an unknown number. "You think you won? You haven't seen anything yet." My heart stopped. I stared at the message, my breath catching in my throat. It was from Beth. I hadn't heard from her since the wedding, since the list, since the mediation. I had blocked her number, her email, her social media accounts. I had thought she was gone, finished, defeated. Apparently, I was wrong. I showed the message to Jeremy when he arrived a few hours later, his expression darkening as he read it. "Don't respond," he said immediately. "Block the number. Delete the message. Whatever you do, don't engage." "I know," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I thought she was done." "She's not done," Jeremy said, his jaw clenched. "She can't let it go. This isn't about you anymore, Penelope. It's about control. It's about winning. It's about proving that she's the one in charge." I nodded, but the truth was, I was scared. Beth had always been the wild card, the unpredictable element, the one who operated outside the rules. She had manipulated Daniel, coerced him, betrayed him, and then turned on me with the same ruthless efficiency. She was dangerous, and she was still out there. "Do you think she'll try something?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jeremy hesitated, then said, "I don't know, but I'll be watching. I'll make sure you're protected." I believed him. I had to. The investigation over the next few days. Jeremy delved into Beth's background, uncovering a web of financial troubles, legal entanglements, and personal scandals that would have been comical if they weren't so tragic. She had defaulted on several loans, been evicted from her apartment, and was currently embroiled in a custody battle with her ex-husband. The boutique she had bragged about opening was a front for a pyramid scheme, and the photography studio had been shut down for tax fraud. "She's drowning," Jeremy said, spreading the documents across my kitchen table. "And she's trying to drag you down with her." "Why me?" I asked, staring at the paperwork. "Why target me specifically?" "Because you represent everything she's not," Jeremy replied. "Successful, independent, self-assured. You're the living embodiment of the life she wishes she had. And she hates you for it." The realization was chilling. I had thought Beth's animosity was personal, a product of sibling rivalry or some twisted form of jealousy. But it was more than that. It was existential. I was a threat to her very identity. A living, breathing refutation of everything she believed about herself. "She's not going to stop, is she?" I asked, my voice small. Jeremy shook his head. "Not until she gets what she wants. Or until she destroys you trying." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Then we need to be ready." The threat the next week was a blur of activity. Jeremy worked with a private investigator to track Beth's movements, while I doubled down on security at my apartment and my office. I installed new locks, added security cameras, and changed all my passwords. I was a fortress, a soldier, a woman preparing for war. The paranoia was exhausting, but I couldn't shake it. Every time the phone rang, I flinched. Every time an email arrived from an unknown sender, I held my breath. Every time I saw a dark-haired woman in a public place, I wondered if it was her. Jeremy tried to reassure me, reminding me that Beth was all bluster and no substance, that she was too focused on her own survival to mount a serious attack. But I couldn't help it. I was wired, jumpy, hypervigilant. I was living in a state of constant fear, and it was eating me alive. One evening, as I sat on the couch, staring at the blank screen of my laptop, Jeremy sat down beside me. "Talk to me," he said, his voice gentle. "I'm scared," I admitted, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "I'm scared of her, of what she might do, of what she might say, of what she might take from me. I'm scared that I'll never be free of her, that she'll haunt me for the rest of my life." Jeremy put his arm around me, pulling me close. "You're not alone," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here. I'll always be here. And we'll get through this together." I leaned into him, allowing myself to be comforted. I was not alone. I was not helpless. I was not powerless. I was a survivor, a victor, a warrior. And I was going to win. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. I was at work, finalizing the details for a corporate gala, when my office phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID, expecting it to be a vendor or a client. Instead, it was an unknown number. "Hello?" I said, my voice professional. "Penelope," a familiar voice said, sharp and clear. "We need to talk." It was Beth. I felt the blood drain from my face. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold. "To make a deal," she replied, her tone casual, as if we were old friends discussing the weather. "You give me the house, and I'll disappear. Forever." I stared at the phone, my mind racing. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm serious," she said, her voice hardening. "I know you don't want to deal with the hassle, the publicity, the legal fees. I know you just want this whole thing to go away. And I can make that happen. For a price." "What price?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Half the equity in the house," she said, as if it were a reasonable request. 50-50. You keep the property. I get the money. Simple. I laughed. A harsh, bitter sound. "You think I'm stupid?" "Stupid," she repeated, her voice dripping with contempt. "No, Penelope. I think you're smart. I think you're practical. I think you're a businesswoman who understands the value of a good deal. And I think you're tired of fighting. Aren't you?" I was. God. I was tired of the constant stress, the endless vigilance, the gnawing fear. I was tired of looking over my shoulder, of second-guessing every decision, of living in a state of perpetual anxiety. I wanted it to be over. I wanted to be free. But not like this. "Go to hell," I said, hanging up the phone. I sat there for a long moment, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. Then I called Jeremy. "She called," I said, my voice shaking. "She wants half the house." Jeremy didn't hesitate. "Don't respond. Don't negotiate. Don't engage. She's trying to bait you." "I know," I replied, my voice steadier now. I wanted it to be over." "I know," Jeremy said, his voice gentle. "But this isn't the way. You've come too far to give up now." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. He was right. I had come too far. I had fought too hard. I had sacrificed too much. I wasn't going to let Beth win. I wasn't going to let her take anything else from me. The trap. Beth didn't give up. Over the next few days, she escalated her campaign, sending threatening emails, making harassing phone calls, and even showing up at my office building. She was careful, clever, always staying just within the bounds of legality. But the intent was clear. She was trying to wear me down, to break my spirit, to force me into submission. Jeremy worked tirelessly to document everything, gathering evidence that would support a restraining order if necessary. But the legal process was slow. And Beth was impatient. She wanted results. And she wanted them now. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. I was working late, finishing up a proposal for a potential client, when my office door burst open. I looked up, expecting to see one of my employees. Instead, it was Beth. She was dressed in a tailored pantsuit. Her hair styled perfectly. Her makeup flawless. She looked like she belonged in a boardroom, not a small event planning office in downtown Chicago. She smiled. A cold, predatory smile that made my skin crawl. "Surprise," she said, stepping into the room. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Business," she replied, her tone cheerful. "We need to talk." "No," I said, backing away. "Whatever you're selling, I'm not interested." "Oh. Come now, Penelope," she said, her smile widening. "Don't be like that. We're family. We should be able to work together." "We're not family," I shot back. "And we're definitely not partners." She shrugged, her expression indifferent. "Suit yourself. But you're making a mistake. You could end this today, with a simple signature. Instead, you're choosing to fight. And fighting is expensive, Penelope. It's exhausting. And eventually, you're going to lose." "I'm not afraid of you," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coiling in my stomach. "Maybe not," she conceded. "But you should be. Because I'm not going away. I'm going to keep coming after you. Keep pushing you. Keep making your life miserable until you give up. And you will give up. Everyone does." I stared at her, my mind racing. She was trying to intimidate me, to scare me, to force me into submission. But I wasn't going to let her. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice firm. "And neither are you." She smiled, a genuine smile this time. And it was terrifying. "We'll see," she said, turning toward the door. "We'll see." The resolution Beth didn't come back to my office. But the threat remained. Jeremy increased security, hiring a private guard to patrol the building. And I installed additional surveillance cameras. I was a fortress. A soldier. A woman preparing for war. But the truth was, I was exhausted. The constant vigilance. The endless stress. The gnawing fear, it was taking its toll. I was functioning. But barely. I was surviving. But not living. I was a shell of the woman I had been a year ago. A ghost of the person I had thought I would become. Jeremy saw it. Of course. He saw the dark circles under my eyes. The weight loss. The way I flinched at sudden noises. He tried to help. But there was only so much he could do. I was the one who had to fight. The one who had to endure. The one who had to survive. The resolution came unexpectedly. On a rainy Sunday afternoon. I was at home, curled up on the couch with a cup of tea. When the doorbell rang, I hesitated, then got up to answer it. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I wasn't in the mood for company. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see a young woman standing on my porch. She was in her mid-20s, with short brown hair and a nervous expression. She clutched a manila folder to her chest, and her eyes were red-rimmed, as if she had been crying. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice cautious. "Are you Penelope Caldwell?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," I replied, my curiosity piqued. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, glancing over her shoulder, "but I have something that belongs to you." She held out the folder, and I took it, my brow furrowing. I opened it, and my heart stopped. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, all of Daniel and Beth, in various stages of intimacy. The same photographs I had thrown into the river. The ones I thought I had destroyed. "Where did you get these?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Sarah," she said, ignoring my question. "I'm Daniel's daughter." The world stopped. I stared at her, my mind reeling. Daniel had a daughter. A child. A family that I had known nothing about. "She's my half-sister," Sarah continued, her voice breaking. "I found these in his safe when I was cleaning out his condo. I thought you should have them." I closed the folder, my hands shaking. "Why?" I asked, my voice small. "Because you deserve to know the truth," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "About him. About her. About everything." I nodded, unable to speak. Sarah hesitated, then said, "He's not a good man, Penelope. He never was. He's a liar." A cheat. A user. He's been using people his whole life. And he's very good at it. But he's not invincible. He's not untouchable. And he's not going to get away with it. I stared at her. My heart breaking. Thank you, I said, my voice trembling. She nodded, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the rain. I closed the door, my legs buckling beneath me. I sank to the floor. The folder clutched to my chest. And I cried. I cried for the life I had lost. For the man I had loved. For the woman I had been. I cried for the lies. The manipulation. The betrayal. I cried for the child I had never known. The family I had never been part of. I cried until I had no tears left. Until the pain was a dull throb in my chest. Until the world was quiet again. The truth was devastating. Daniel had been married before. To a woman named Emily. Whom he had met in college. They had been together for 5 years. Married for 2. Before she had died in a car accident. Sarah was their daughter. Born a year after the wedding. Daniel had never told me about her. Never mentioned her. Never introduced me to her. He had hidden her existence. Just as he had hidden his financial troubles. His relationship with Beth. His true nature. I learned all of this from Sarah. Who provided me with documents, photographs, and a heartbreaking account of her life with a father who had never been present. Never been reliable. Never been honest. He used to say you were the one, she said. Her voice soft. He said you were different. That you were special. That you were the first person who had ever really seen him. I think he believed it. I think he wanted to believe it. But it wasn't true. It was never true. I closed my eyes. The pain unbearable. I'm sorry, I said. My voice barely above a whisper. Don't be, she replied. Her tone gentle. You didn't do anything wrong. He did? I nodded, unable to speak. Sarah stayed for a while. Talking about her mother. About her childhood. About the man she had called Dad. She was kind. Compassionate. Understanding. She was everything I had wanted Daniel to be. Everything I had needed him to be. When she left, I was alone. But I was not empty. I was not broken. I was not lost. I was free. The vow I sat on the floor of my living room for a long time. The folder in my lap. The truth burning in my chest. I thought about the vows I had broken. The ones I had kept. The ones I was still making to myself. I thought about the life I had lost. The man I had loved. The woman I had been. I thought about the lies. The manipulation. The betrayal. I thought about the child I had never known. The family I had never been part of. And I thought about the future. Uncertain and bright. The path ahead. Rocky but clear. I made a vow to myself then. A solemn promise sealed in the ruins of everything I had lost. I vowed to never again let anyone else define my worth. My value. My future. I vowed to never again sacrifice my autonomy for the sake of love. I vowed to never again ignore the red flags. To dismiss the warnings. To rationalize the inexcusable. I vowed to be honest with myself. To be true to myself. To be faithful to myself. I vowed to honor my own needs. My own desires. My own dreams. I vowed to build a life that was mine. Not borrowed. Not inherited. Not imposed. I vowed to love myself. To cherish myself. To protect myself. I vowed to be my own champion. My own advocate. My own hero. And I vowed to never, ever forget the lessons I had learned. The new beginning. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity. I hired a new team to handle the day-to-day operations of my business, giving myself the space and time to heal. I started therapy again, this time with a specialist in trauma and recovery. I reconnected with old friends, rebuilding the support network I had neglected for so long. Slowly, incrementally, I began to feel like myself again. Not the woman I had been before Daniel, but a new version. Stronger, wiser, more resilient. I was not the same person I had been a year ago. I was not the same person I had been a month ago. I was not even the same person I had been a week ago. I was changing, growing, healing. I was becoming. And for the first time, I was okay with that. The letter 2 months after Sarah's visit. I received a letter from Daniel. It was handwritten. On the same heavy cream-colored paper he had used before. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. My hands shaking. The letter was short. Just a few paragraphs. He apologized for everything, for lying about his past, for hiding Sarah's existence, for manipulating me, for hurting me. He admitted that he had never loved me. Not really. That he had only loved the idea of me, the fantasy of what we could have been. He asked for forgiveness, for understanding, for closure. I read the letter 3 times before folding it and placing it in the fire. I watched the flames consume it, reducing it to ash and smoke. It was a fitting end to our story, a symbolic burning of the past, a ceremonial cleansing of the pain. I did not forgive him. I did not understand him. I did not seek closure. I simply let him go. The freedom the house sold 6 months after the ruling. I used the proceeds to pay off my remaining debts and invest in my business. I leased a new office space, larger and brighter than the old one, with a view of the Chicago skyline. I hired additional staff, expanding my team and my capabilities. My business thrived. And with it, my confidence. I traveled for the first time since the wedding, taking a solo trip to Italy. I wandered the streets of Rome, drank wine in Tuscany, and sailed the coast of Amalfi. I was alone, but I was not lonely. I was independent, but I was not isolated. I was free. I returned to Chicago with a sense of purpose, a sense of direction. I threw myself into my work, taking on challenging projects and pursuing ambitious goals. I was a force, a dynamo, a woman on a mission. And I was happy. The acknowledgement one evening, as I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the sun set over the city, Jeremy joined me. He had been quiet all evening, content to watch the world go by. But now he turned to me, his expression serious. "You've changed," he said, stating the obvious. "I have," I replied, smiling. "I'm different. Better," he corrected. "You're better." I nodded, accepting the compliment. "I had help." "True," he agreed. "But you did the work. You made the choices. You took the risks. You won." I thought about that for a long moment. I had won, hadn't I? I had survived the betrayal, the manipulation, the loss. I had faced my demons, confronted my past, and emerged stronger. I had built a new life, a better life, a life that was truly mine. I had won. The celebration we celebrated that weekend, just the 2 of us, with a quiet dinner at my favorite restaurant. We drank champagne, toasted our victories, and talked about the future. Jeremy had been promoted, taking on a leadership role at his firm. I had landed a major contract, securing my position as one of the top event planners in the city. We were both thriving, both growing, both becoming. "It's not over," Jeremy said, raising his glass. "There will be more challenges, more obstacles, more battles to fight." "I know," I replied, clinking my glass against his. "But we'll face them together." He smiled, his eyes warm. "Always." We drank to that, to the challenges ahead, to the battles yet to come, to the life we were building together. It was not a fairy tale, not a romance, not a happily ever after. It was real, messy, complicated, and it was perfect. The reflection later that night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about everything that had happened. I thought about the dress, the ring, the smile. I thought about the list, the rules, the betrayal. I thought about the court, the cost, the reckoning. I thought about the vow, the freedom, the new beginning. I thought about Daniel, about Beth, about Sarah. I thought about the lies, the manipulation, the truth. I thought about the past, the present, the future. And I realized something important. I was not defined by what had happened to me. I was defined by how I had responded. I was defined by the choices I had made, the risks I had taken, the battles I had fought. I was defined by my resilience, my strength, my courage. I was defined by me. The legacy of the wedding dress still hung in the garment bag in my closet. I hadn't looked at it in months, But now I found myself staring at it, remembering the day I had worn it, the hopes I had pinned on it, the dreams it had represented. It was just a dress, a piece of fabric, a symbol of a life that never was. But it was also a testament to my journey, a reminder of how far I had come. I took it down from the hanger, unfolded it, and laid it on the bed. It was beautiful. Still, despite the tears and the travel and the time, it was a relic of a different era, a different version of myself. I ran my fingers over the delicate lace, the intricate beadwork, the soft satin. It was exquisite. It was perfect. It was mine. I folded it carefully, placed it back in the garment bag, and zipped it up. Then I carried it to the balcony and laid it on the railing, letting the wind catch it, letting it billow like a sail. I watched it for a long moment, the fabric dancing in the breeze. And then I let it go. It floated away, carried by the wind, disappearing into the night. It was gone. Just like that. Just like him. Just like them. Just like the past. I turned away, closing the balcony door behind me. I was done with the dress, the ring, the smile. I was done with the list, the rules, the betrayal. I was done with the court, the cost, the reckoning. I was done with the vow, the freedom, the new beginning. I was done. The promise. I stood at the window, watching the city lights twinkle in the darkness. I thought about the vow I had made to myself, the promise to honor my own needs, my own desires, my own dreams. I thought about the life I had built, the person I had become, the future I was creating. And I made another vow, a final promise sealed in the quiet of my apartment, in the stillness of the night. I vowed to never forget where I came from. I vowed to never stop growing, learning, evolving. I vowed to never lose sight of who I was, of what I valued, of what I believed in. I vowed to never settle, never compromise, never surrender. I vowed to be brave. I vowed to be bold. I vowed to be brilliant. I vowed to love fiercely, live fully, and laugh often. And I vowed to never, ever look back. The end. The sun rose over Chicago the next morning, casting a warm glow over the city. I stood on the balcony, wrapped in a thick robe, watching the world wake up. The sky was the color of honey, and the air was crisp and cold. It was a new day, a new beginning, a new chapter. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the trials and tribulations, the triumphs and tragedies. I thought about the people who had shaped me, the choices that had defined me, the lessons that had changed me. I thought about the future, bright and uncertain, and the path ahead, rocky but clear. I was not the same person I had been a year ago. I was not the same person I had been a month ago. I was not even the same person I had been a week ago. I was changing, growing, healing. I was becoming. And for the first time, I was okay with that. I was home. The end.